10,000 warriors clad in bronze stood without a sound as a sea of enemies, nearly 300,000 strong, spilled across the distant plain. These were Spartans who had buried brothers only a year earlier, men lost at the narrow pass where hope itself had bled out. What followed would be remembered as one of the fiercest acts of retribution the ancient world ever witnessed. Before the sun set, 50,000 Persian soldiers would be dead, their blood soaking into Greek soil. On this single day, August 27, 479 BCE, the future of the Western world balanced on the edge of a spear. By the end of this story, you will understand how a vastly outnumbered Greek force engineered one of history's most devastating retaliations, why the Persian army marched willingly into a death trap, and how a brutal battlefield method transformed disciplined men into relentless instruments of destruction. Here is what will be uncovered. First, the hidden signal that unleashed the carnage, a quiet prayer that set everything in motion. Second, the shocking reason a Spartan commander allowed his army to suffer thirst while fresh water lay only miles away. And third, the precise instant when the Persian general realized the truth, that he had been utterly deceived. But ask yourself this: why did Spartan soldiers remain motionless while arrows cut them down? How did starving, dehydrated Greeks suddenly erupt into an unstoppable storm of bronze and rage? And what broke the spirit of hardened Persian veterans, men who had conquered half the known world, forcing them to flee in terror? How could the largest army ever assembled fall for such a deadly ruse? Think about it. 300,000 seasoned troops, led by the empire's most capable commander, marched straight into slaughter. How did the Greeks kill 50,000 enemies while losing barely 1,000 themselves? And who was Pausanias, the enigmatic Spartan leader who claimed divine guidance and who turned near collapse into overwhelming victory? This is his story, and the story of how 10,000 men exacted a blood debt that echoed across centuries. To understand this revenge, we must go back to where it all began. If stories of ancient warriors transforming defeat into triumph captivate you, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow along for more tales of history's most brutal comebacks. Now, picture the blazing heat of late summer 479 BCE. Just 1 year earlier, 300 Spartans had made their legendary stand at Thermopylae. King Leonidas and his men held the narrow pass for days against impossible odds until betrayal doomed them. Not one Spartan survived. Their bodies were defiled. Leonidas's head was displayed as a warning. The message from Persia was unmistakable: resist and be erased. Enter the figures who would shape this revenge. First, Pausanias, the shadowed regent of Sparta, nephew of Leonidas. Young, calculating, and deeply feared, he was said to consult oracles before every decision. Soldiers whispered that he read the future in blood and sacrifice. At only 25, he carried the honor of Sparta and the weight of his family's vengeance on his shoulders, hidden beneath layers of bronze. Facing him stood Mardonius, the true power behind Persia's throne, brother-in-law to Xerxes. After the Persian navy's defeat at Salamis forced Xerxes to retreat east, Mardonius remained behind with hundreds of thousands of elite troops. He burned Athens to the ground, fractured Greek alliances, and now sought to finish what Thermopylae had begun. Victory here would elevate him above all others in the empire. Then there was Aristides, called the Just, commander of Athens. His city was a blackened ruin. Persian flames had devoured temples, statues, and generations of culture. For him, this war was not abstract, it was deeply personal. Every Athenian under his command had lost homes, families, or both to Persian fire. At this time, the Persian Empire stretched farther than any before it. From India to Egypt, from the Caucasus to Africa's edge, its armies had crushed Babylon, subdued Egypt, and bent countless kingdoms to its will. Persian cavalry thundered across battlefields like living death. Their archers turned daylight into darkness. The immortals, 10,000 elite guards, had never known defeat. Opposing them was a fragile Greek coalition. Sparta and Athens, lifelong rivals, cooperated only out of necessity. Corinth trusted no one. Smaller city-states shifted allegiance whenever survival demanded it. What bound them together was fear and the memory of cities reduced to ash. Athens still smoldered. Refugees flooded allied towns. Smoke lingered in the air, and bitterness lingered in every heart. Only months earlier, Persian forces had methodically destroyed Athens, toppling temples, shattering statues, erasing symbols of identity and pride. And now, on this scorched land, vengeance was about to be paid in full. They poisoned the wells, ruined the farmland, and dragged entire populations into chains. This was not simple invasion. It was an attempt to erase a civilization. Every Greek who stood at Platea had seen the evidence. Rising smoke on the horizon, shattered cities, neighbors who never returned. But this is where Pausanias revealed his first act of brilliance. Rather than striking immediately while anger burned hottest, he chose to wait. He pulled together soldiers from 31 rival city-states, suppressed old grudges, and imposed order on chaos. Raw hatred was reshaped into disciplined purpose. Revenge would come, but only when it served Greek survival. The question was how? How do you defeat an enemy that outnumbers you 3-1? How do you unify Greeks who had spent generations fighting each other? How do you turn desperation into total destruction? Pausanias had an answer, one as ruthless as it was brilliant. It would demand sacrifice, even Greek lives, to ensure Greece itself endured. The Persian army spread across the plains like a living shadow. Ancient writers spoke of 300,000 soldiers. Modern scholars debate the figure, but none dispute its overwhelming scale. At the center stood the immortals, 10,000 elite infantry whose ranks were instantly refilled whenever one fell. Their scaled armor shimmered in the sun, their wicker shields were light but broad, and they carried bows, spears, and swords, able to shift tactics at will. Backing them came the cavalry, the true terror of Persian warfare. 30,000 horsemen from Media, Bactria, and Persia thundered across the plains. These were not merely riders, but master horse archers, capable of striking with deadly precision at full speed. Their mobility had crushed armies across the known world, turning rigid formations into helpless targets. On the flat ground near Platea, the Persians held every advantage. The Greeks answered with 80,000 hoplites, heavy infantry built for close combat. At their core stood 10,000 Spartans, not a ceremonial guard, but the full military strength of Lacedaemon. Each Spartan had been trained since childhood, molded entirely for war. Their bronze armor could deflect Persian arrows. Their spears, nearly 8 feet long, outranged enemy weapons. Their discipline was absolute. They advanced together, held together, and died together. Athens sent 8,000 men driven by fury and loss. Corinth contributed 5,000, Megara 3,000. Even tiny Platea, on whose land the battle would be fought, provided 600. Every Greek city that still stood free sent what it could. But numbers alone do not explain what followed. The weapons defined everything. Greek hoplites fought with the dory, a long thrusting spear designed for the tight formation of the phalanx. Their heavy shields locked together into a solid wall. Fully armored in bronze breastplates, greaves, and helmets, each man was a moving fortress. But that protection came at a cost. Retreat was nearly impossible. Greeks did not fall back. They held or they died. The Persians fought differently. Their spears were shorter, meant for flexibility. Their shields were light and maneuverable. Most wore linen or leather armor, sacrificing protection for speed. Their strength lay in coordination. Archers to weaken the enemy, cavalry to surround, infantry to finish. They flowed across battlefields like water. The Greeks stood like stone. Mardonius followed a strategy that had succeeded many times before. He relied on Greek collaborators, entire regions that had sided with Persia, offering intelligence and tens of thousands of troops. His cavalry cut supply lines and water access. He would force the Greeks to either attack unfavorable ground or slowly collapse from thirst and hunger. When desperation shattered their formations, Persian mobility would turn the fight into slaughter. It had worked before. It should have worked again. But Pausanias faced a threat even greater than Persian numbers: the fragile Greek alliance itself. Spartans dismissed Athenians as weak idealists. Athenians viewed Spartans as brutal aristocrats. Corinth trusted neither. Each force answered to its own commander, guarded its own pride, and nursed old grudges. One misstep, one insult, and the coalition would fracture. Pausanias wasn't commanding an army. He was managing 31 competing egos. Then he made a decision that stunned everyone. Instead of taking strong defensive high ground, he placed his army in the low foothills south of Platea, near the Asopus River. The position provided water, but left his flanks dangerously exposed to Persian cavalry. Every rule of warfare argued against it, which is precisely why Mardonius would see it as weakness. Next came the omens. The Greeks never fought without divine approval, and Pausanias took this obsession to extremes. Each morning he ordered sacrifices, examined entrails, and consulted seers. Days passed. The men grew uneasy. The Persians mocked them openly. What kind of commander let animal organs decide the fate of an army? But Pausanias waited. The gods would give their answer when the trap was fully set. For 10 days the armies faced each other across the plain. Skirmishes flared, cavalry raids, arrow exchanges, but no full engagement. Mardonius grew confident. Greek hesitation looked like fear. His cavalry dominated the ground between the armies. His supply lines were intact. Time favored Persia. Let the Greeks bake in their armor beneath the August sun. Thirst would do what arrows could not. Then came the 11th day. At first, nothing changed. Persian cavalry tested Greek reactions. Arrows flew in probing volleys. But on the second day of renewed pressure, Mardonius unleashed his horsemen in full force. Waves of cavalry surged forward, loosing arrows into Greek ranks before retreating beyond spear range. It was classic Persian warfare: distance, speed, and relentless pressure. From dawn until dusk, the harassment never ceased. Morning brought swarms of horse archers. Midday saw heavier cavalry charges that stopped just short of contact. Evening delivered more arrows, more insults, more psychological strain. The Greeks could do nothing. Heavy infantry cannot chase horses, and that helplessness was exactly what Pausanias wanted. All they could do was endure, stand firm, bleed. Day after day, arrows slipped through tiny seams in bronze armor, cutting men down where they stood. Dozens fell daily. And this is where Pausanias revealed the depth of his brilliance. He allowed it to continue. While soldiers raged and demanded battle, he watched. While allies questioned his resolve, he measured timing, distance, rhythm. Every cavalry strike taught him something new. With each passing day, Mardonius grew more confident and more careless, unwittingly exposing his entire tactical routine. Then, the water failed. Persian horsemen located the springs feeding the Greek camps and corrupted them. Dead animals, filth, anything that would make the water unusable. The Asopus River still flowed, but reaching it meant sending men into open ground under constant arrow fire. Water runs became death sentences. Rations followed. Under the August sun, sealed inside nearly 70 pounds of bronze, dehydration became deadlier than Persian steel. By the 6th day, Greek supply wagons stopped arriving. Persian cavalry intercepted every convoy coming from the south. Food vanished, water barrels ran dry. Men collapsed where they stood, victims of heat and thirst. The Spartans held discipline, but the alliance began to unravel. Arguments erupted, Athenians blamed Spartan positioning, Corinthians threatened withdrawal. Unity cracked under pressure. What happened next shattered every expectation of ancient warfare. On the night of the 10th day, Pausanias ordered a retreat. Not a measured withdrawal, not a controlled repositioning, a full nighttime movement toward Platea. 80,000 men who had never maneuvered as a single force, marching in darkness. To this day, historians argue whether this was panic or genius. The result was exactly what any rational commander would predict: chaos. Units lost contact, orders dissolved in the dark. Athenians drifted too far left, Corinthians veered too far right. Smaller contingents scattered between them. When dawn came, the Greek army was no longer an army, but three isolated groups stretched across miles of broken ground. A disaster. Except the Spartans hadn't moved. They remained on their original ridge. Their commander, Amampharatus, had refused the order outright, declaring retreat dishonor. While the rest of the alliance stumbled through darkness, 10,000 Spartans stood exactly where they had been for 10 days. At sunrise, they were completely alone, cut off from support, exposed on gentle terrain ideal for cavalry, their backs pressed against uneven ground. Persian scouts could scarcely believe what they saw. The Greek coalition had fallen apart. Spartans isolated, allies scattered. They raced back with the news. Mardonius was elated. 10 days of pressure had broken Greek resolve. Victory lay before him. Now came annihilation. He ordered the entire army forward. Infantry, cavalry, all of it. Why leave survivors? The Spartans would be crushed first. Then the scattered contingents hunted down and destroyed. By nightfall, Greece would be finished. Then Mardonius made the decision that sealed his fate. Instead of sending cavalry alone to destroy the Spartans, he led his elite infantry personally. This was not merely strategy, it was spectacle. Leonidas' nephew would die where the world could see it. Persian morale would soar. Greek resistance would collapse. The symbolism was irresistible. At first light, the Persian host surged forward. Cavalry thundered ahead, clouds of dust rising beneath tens of thousands of hooves. Behind them advanced the immortals, armor flashing like scales in the sun. Greek collaborators marched beside them, weapons raised against their own kin. The army moved with the confidence of predators closing in on wounded prey. And then came the detail that still confounds historians. As the Persians advanced, Pausanias ordered the Spartans to slowly withdraw, not flee, but drift backward over the reverse slope of the ridge. To Persian eyes, it looked like fear. Spartans retreating without resistance. In truth, Pausanias was shifting his line by mere hundreds of yards onto ground he had studied for 10 days, terrain that narrowed Persian movement and stripped cavalry of its advantage. The trap was almost set. The scattered Greek contingents were not fleeing, they were exactly where Pausanias intended. The isolated Spartans were not abandoned, they were the bait. And Mardonius, hungry for glory, was marching hundreds of thousands straight into a killing ground. At sunrise, Persian cavalry struck first. 10,000 horsemen surged toward the Spartan line in a storm of hooves and dust. Arrows fell like horizontal rain. Ancient accounts describe thousands of shafts per minute, the sky itself darkening. This was not battle, it was methodical slaughter. Spartans raised their shields, locking them together into a solid wall. Each shield protected the man beside it, but arrows found openings, thighs, throats, gaps beneath arms. Men fell. Blood soaked the ground. Still, the Spartans did not move. As casualties mounted, they did not charge. They did not respond. They simply stood, locked shields, dying in silence. Persian cavalry pressed closer, emboldened. Why weren't these legendary warriors fighting back? Pausanias stood in the front rank, arrows splintering against his shield, performing sacrifice after sacrifice. Each time, the omens were wrong. Without divine approval, the Spartans would not advance. Men screamed in frustration. Officers begged. Persian laughter carried across the field. Still, the sacrifices continued. At last, the allies on the Spartan right broke. Unable to endure the sight any longer, 1,500 Tegeans roared and charged without orders. No formation, no signal, just fury unleashed. And then physics took over. Heavy bronze smashed into horses that had crept too close. Spears punched into flanks. Riders tumbled. Horses screamed. The reckless charge should have failed, but Persian cavalry, overconfident after days of harassment, collapsed into confusion. In that instant, tens of thousands of lives were doomed. Pausanias lifted his arms and cried out to Hera, guardian of cities. This time, the signs changed. The signs turned favorable. The signal the Spartans had waited for, prayed for, finally came, and the ancient world was about to be torn apart. What the Persians witnessed shattered their confidence. The Spartans did not sprint, they did not shout. 10,000 men stepped forward as one, bronze sandals striking earth in flawless rhythm, shields fused edge to edge, spear points aligned like the teeth of a single monstrous blade. This was not an army moving, it was something alive, slow, unstoppable, the phalanx at its most terrifying, discipline weaponized. Behind the cavalry screen, Mardonius saw the advance and made the choice that would decide everything. He pulled his horsemen aside and committed his elite infantry. The immortals would face the Spartans directly. Scale armor against solid bronze, Persian valor against Greek precision. This clash would determine the fate of empires. The collision was catastrophic. Ancient accounts claim the impact could be heard miles away. Spears slammed into shields, curved blades screeched across bronze. The front ranks on both sides died instantly, crushed between the force of thousands pressing forward. Then came the grinding horror that defined ancient battle, the shove of shields, frantic thrusts beneath rims, bodies packed so tightly that the fallen could not collapse. This is where Spartan superiority became undeniable. Their spears were longer, only a couple of feet, but in battle, inches decide life and death. Spartans struck first, again and again. Persian swords glanced off bronze armor. Spartan thrusts slipped into throats, faces, armpits, every weakness found by muscle memory honed since childhood. And most importantly, the line held. The Persians fought bravely as individuals, the Spartans fought as a single machine. What followed stunned even seasoned warriors. The immortals, the undefeated core of the Persian Empire, were being annihilated. Their scale armor, excellent against arrows, meant nothing against heavy spears driven with both hands. Their shorter weapons couldn't reach past the forest of Greek points. They died in layers, bodies stacked so densely that the living climbed over the dead just to reach the fight. Seeing his center collapsing, Mardonius made his final gamble. He mounted his white horse and rode directly into the battle, surrounded by his personal cavalry guard. This was how ancient leaders proved destiny favored them. His gold armor burned in the morning light, a beacon meant to rally the faltering line. For a brief moment, it worked. Persians surged forward, inspired by their commander's presence. The struggle teetered, but the Spartans were no longer alone. While Persian focus locked onto the Spartan line, the rest of the Greek army returned. Athenians smashed into the Persian-aligned Greeks on the left. Corinthians and allies enveloped the right. What Mardonius believed was a shattered army fleeing in panic had been a calculated redeployment. The retreat had been theater. Then the sound came. The Spartan battle hymn, deep, rhythmic, relentless, joined by tens of thousands of Greek voices. The plain echoed. Persian confidence collapsed as realization hit. They were not chasing fugitives. They were surrounded by a coordinated force that had outplayed them completely. At the center, destiny intervened. As Mardonius led yet another charge, attempting to shatter the Spartan line through sheer will, a Spartan named Leonidas saw him. No spear, no sword. He seized a stone from the ground and hurled it with everything he had. The rock struck Mardonius in the head, crushing his skull through the helmet. The Persian commander fell from his horse, dead before he touched the earth. In that instant, Persian morale didn't crack, it vanished. Leaderless, encircled, facing an advancing wall of bronze, the largest army the world had ever known dissolved into terror. Men turned to flee and discovered escape was impossible. Their own cavalry choked the rear. Horses screamed, soldiers trampled one another. Formation collapsed into blind panic, and the Greeks came forward, not chasing, but harvesting. Spartans did not break formation. They advanced methodically, killing everything ahead of them.
Persians who stood died facing shields. Those who ran died with spears in their backs. Lighter Greek troops sprinted after fugitives, turning the plain into a slaughterhouse that stretched for miles. The ground disappeared beneath bodies. Blood soaked the dust into thick mud. No mercy was given. This was no longer battle, it was eradication. A debt paid in full. Every Spartan who had died at Thermopylae was being answered for, many times over. Some Persians attempted refuge in their fortified camp, throwing up defenses in desperation. It delayed nothing. Greeks surrounded it, breached the walls, smashed the gates. What followed inside was worse than the open field slaughter. Trapped men were cut down with nowhere to run. No surrender was offered, none accepted. The camp became a place of death remembered long after the bodies were gone. Across the countryside, the nightmare spread. Greek cavalry hunted stragglers. Local villagers emerged with farm tools and stones. Boys attacked exhausted soldiers. Roads north turned into corridors of corpses stretching beyond sight. And Pausanias had even planned this. Greek reserves had not been placed to reinforce the battle, but to seal every escape route. The trap was complete.
The Persians who tried to run discovered too late that escape no longer existed. Fresh Greek units blocked every path of retreat. What had looked like chaos during the night withdrawal now revealed its true purpose: funnels of death carefully arranged to trap an army inside a vast killing enclosure. Only one Persian commander reacted with clarity. Artabazus, leading roughly 40,000 men on the Persian left, saw Mardonius fall and understood instantly what it meant. He did not attempt heroics. He did not try to stabilize the line. He ordered an immediate withdrawal, abandoning wounded, supplies, armor, anything that slowed movement. Speed was all that mattered. While the Persian center and right were torn apart, Artabazus force-marched north. He reached Asia with most of his men alive. It was the sole Persian success of a catastrophic day. By late morning, organized resistance was finished. What followed was no longer battle, it was aftermath, and it would continue until nightfall. The wooden walls of the Persian camp were never meant to withstand vengeance. The Athenians reached it first. Their battering rams shattered gates as defenders clung desperately to flimsy palisades built for shelter, not siege. When the barriers collapsed, what surged inside was no longer an army. It was reckoning made flesh. These were men who had watched their city burn, who had seen temples defiled and history erased. Now repayment came due. Inside the camp, tens of thousands of Persians were trapped in a shrinking cage. Cavalry nobles abandoned horses to fight on foot. Immortals tried to form defensive knots. Common soldiers were crushed against walls, trampling each other in blind panic. Spears turned the confined space into a slaughterhouse. There was no room to swing swords. There was nowhere to run. Men died standing. Then the Spartans arrived. They entered through the broken gates in formation, calm, aligned, methodical. Where the Athenians struck in fury, the Spartans killed with mechanical precision. Lines formed, shields locked, spears advanced. No shouting, no haste, just steady execution. Their advance compressed Persians into tighter masses, making death easier, faster, inevitable. What archaeologists later uncovered still disturbs researchers. Mass graves holding thousands, skeletons with crushed skulls, severed hands, defensive wounds frozen in bone. Evidence suggests the killing continued long after resistance had ended.
This was no longer war. It was deliberate eradication. One Persian noble offered a fortune, hundreds of talents of gold for his life. A Spartan killed him before the offer finished. Wealth lay scattered in blood and mud, untouched. The Greeks had not come for treasure. They had come to balance accounts. By afternoon, the numbers defied comprehension. Persian dead carpeted the land so thickly that counting became impossible. Conservative estimates placed losses at more than 50,000. The empire's elite, its nobility, officers, administrators died there. Persian authority in the West died with them. Greek losses barely reached 1,000. Sparta lost 91 men, Athens 52, Tegea 16, a casualty ratio approaching 50-1, among the most unequal victories ever recorded. How does an army lose tens of thousands while inflicting so little in return? The answer lay in terrain chosen with care, deception executed flawlessly, and discipline that never broke. Pausanias later found Mardonius's body among the dead. The Persian commander lay where he had fallen, golden armor stained dark, skull shattered by a simple stone. Some urged desecration, vengeance for Leonidas. Pausanias refused. "We are Greeks," he said, "not barbarians." Mardonius was buried with honor, the only mercy granted that day. But mercy ended there. Fleeing Persians were hunted through forests, cut down at river crossings, chased until exhaustion finished what weapons began. Villagers emerged from hiding, farmers attacked with scythes, shepherds with clubs, women with knives. Roads north became corridors of death, marked by unburied bodies. Greek collaborators faced particular fury. Those who had fought beside Persia were executed, branded, enslaved, or exiled. Even their cities barely escaped destruction. Greek vengeance against traitors rivaled its brutality toward invaders. As news spread, Greece erupted. Athens was avenged, Sparta's honor restored. The shadow that had loomed for generations vanished in a single afternoon. Temples overflowed with offerings, streets rang with celebration. Yet Pausanias, standing amid the devastation, may have understood the cost. Greece was free, but unity was already fraying. From captured bronze, the Greeks forged a monument, 3 intertwined serpents supporting a golden tripod. Upon it were carved the names of the 31 cities that had stood together. The serpent column stood for centuries at Delphi, a reminder of sacrifice and triumph. Today, its remains stand in Istanbul, 2.5 millennia later, still bearing witness to the price of freedom. The killing didn't truly end until darkness fell. Even then, torchlight searches continued. At dawn, the land revealed what had been done. A battlefield transformed into a vast graveyard. Bodies stretched beyond sight. And the ancient world was never the same again.
Carrion birds filled the sky. The smell of death clung to the land for months, even after mass burnings reduced thousands of bodies to ash. Greece had won its freedom, but its unity died on the same field. The enemy that had forced rival cities to stand together was gone, killed alongside Mardonius. With Persia removed as a threat, the fragile alliance collapsed. The victory at Platea did not open a golden age. It started a countdown. On that August day, none of this was visible. What mattered then was that Greece had answered Persia's challenge. Every one of Leonidas's 300 had been repaid many times over, the debt written in blood across the plain. Persian expansion toward the west ended in a single morning of disciplined violence. Democracy survived, philosophy survived, the foundations of Western civilization endured because Pausanias waited for the gods' approval while men died around him. Greece was free, and freedom, as history would show, carried its own dangers. The Persian Empire never again seriously threatened Greek independence. Xerxes retreated to his palaces, his ambitions buried with tens of thousands of elite soldiers. Less than a century later, a Macedonian king named Alexander would turn Greek methods outward and dismantle Persia itself. Platea didn't merely halt history, it reversed its direction. Greek unity lasted only as long as the celebrations. With no external enemy to fear, old rivalries returned with a vengeance. Sparta withdrew into rigid conservatism. Athens used its newfound prestige to build an empire. Within 50 years, former allies would tear each other apart in the Peloponnesian War, draining both cities of strength and influence.
Victory carried the seeds of ruin. Pausanias himself became its embodiment. The architect of Greece's greatest triumph was slowly consumed by ambition. He intrigued with Persia, sought personal power, and betrayed the values he had defended. In the end, the Spartans sealed him inside a temple, leaving him to die of hunger. A savior reduced to a traitor, a hero undone by his own success. Yet the echo of Platea has never faded. When leaders speak of the few overcoming the many, they invoke its lesson. When military academies teach patience, terrain, and timing, they study Pausanias's trap. The principle remains timeless. Discipline, motivation, and intelligent positioning can defeat overwhelming numbers. Technology changes, human nature does not. From Napoleon's disaster in Russia to modern asymmetric wars, the truth endures. Armies defending their homes, fighting with purpose and knowledge of the land, can defy vastly superior forces. Moral strength can outweigh material advantage. Platea saved more than Greek independence. Had Persia prevailed, Athenian democracy would never have flourished. There would be no Socrates questioning authority, no Plato teaching ideals, no Aristotle shaping logic. Rome would have encountered Persian governors, not Greek ideas. Christianity would have emerged into an entirely different world. 6 hours reshaped 25 centuries. And yet, the darkest lesson may be this: civilization is fragile. Those disciplined Spartans who endured arrow storms became relentless executioners. Democratic Athenians became agents of vengeance. The boundary between soldier and butcher vanished when hatred met opportunity. The historian Victor Davis Hanson called Platea the most important battle you've never heard of. He was right. Thermopylae earned immortality through heroic defeat. Tragedy is easier to remember than triumph, but Platea decided the world. Glory belongs to sacrifice. History belongs to victory. It was not beautiful. It was not heroic. It was not designed to inspire poetry or legend. It worked. 50,000 dead enemies speak louder than 300 fallen heroes. 10,000 Spartans did what mourning could not. They settled the account. The debt of Thermopylae was collected in full, at a rate that still stuns the mind. For every Spartan who fell in the pass, more than 160 Persians paid with their lives. By the cold arithmetic of war, it may stand as the most complete act of battlefield vengeance ever recorded. Leonidas was avenged so thoroughly that the Persian Empire never challenged Greece again. Stand on the plains of Platea today, and you will see nothing remarkable. Quiet farmland, gentle slopes, ordinary earth. No towering monument marks the place where empires shattered. And yet the land remembers. Each season plows turn up arrowheads, broken spear tips, fragments of bone. The soil itself bears witness. Freedom was not granted, it was purchased in a single August morning when restraint gave way to annihilation. When defense became destruction, when 10,000 men in bronze reminded the world why Sparta inspired fear beyond reason. The 300 died as symbols, the 10,000 killed as professionals. Both were required, both exacted their cost. History celebrates martyrs, but it is shaped by those who survive. At Platea, ordinary men accepted an extraordinary truth, that for one afternoon, survival demanded brutality. That civilization's foundations were laid not only by ideals, but by violence unleashed without hesitation. That is the truth beneath freedom's myth. Sometimes survival is not gentle. Sometimes it is savage. The Spartans understood this. The question is, do we?